Welcome to Channel AMEC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested about migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn the little bell on the side, so once we have all the updates, you'll be the first one of getting all the insight. Today's video is just right before the new year, and we have just passed Christmas. Hopefully everybody had a wonderful Christmas holidays. Now obviously it's a very intensive couple days, especially today. Australia has just broke its records of the COVID contractions of numbers around the whole nation. So the question is this, as you have read on the title: would the Omicron variant actually crashed the opening of Australian borders? A lot of people during these few days and week, obviously start from the 15th of December, as the nation of Australia has announced its official opening of the border, and obviously Omicron had came out of nowhere, and a lot of the fans and also people had friends and commented in YouTube and also Facebook in regards whether or not the government of Australia will actually close its border. They are all weary about it, and obviously if you wanted to travel, you need to buy a ticket. You don't want to buy air ticket and then receiving information, that a notification in regards to cancellation of flight, as what it already happened in Australia on the Christmas day on the eve, where a lot of domestic flight, I think thousands of them, had actually been cancelled because of the a lot of the working staff in the airport have been contracted with the viruses, so they have to be quarantined, obviously, so they cannot work. So if there are a certain amount of people cannot work in the airport, obviously a cancellation of flight is intended to actually be done, because no one's gonna help, and once your flight landed, no one worked there anymore. So that was the problem. So would this actually affect the whole nation of the border opening? Let's have a look, and let's go in the updates of what's happening today on the day of the 29th of December 2021. This is the most chatted and discussed topic, so I wanted to take a few moments in our channel to discuss this. So let's have a look. The most updated, I've actually gone into this live updated financial review. So National Cabinets had actually, they're going to meet on testing of New South Wales order 50 million rapid tests. So they, the reason, well, you got to think about this. The reason the government is ordering 50 million rapid tests is that they expected probably the virus has gone way beyond of how they have thought. And there are a lot of I've been messaging to a lot of my friends and clients in Sydney and also Melbourne and in Brisbane. The problem all they had is the queue of getting tested is like 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours. I mean, there's so many people required to be tested, and there are so many people haven't been tested yet. That means the virus is in the community. It's, well, everywhere. Well, what they have promised is that once they reach 90% of vaccination, fully vaccination rate, hopefully the hospitalization in the ICU required for the intensive care units will be lessened. Well, obviously, yes, that has been achieved. But if the contraction of the COVID going much higher, obviously the hospitalized personnel will be actually full on. So at this point in time, let's have read. So just came in the Northern Territory has 19 new cases, and he says prediction can be from vaccination or infections. So Kelly said that. Well, anyway, I'm not too sure about this statement, because I've seen so many people around the world, they are fully vaccinated and they still contracted with the Omicron variant. New South Wales testing center hit capacity. Here we go. So, and it's Morrison's, the Prime Minister, is buying more tests, although it's hitting the new capacity. But we'll see how that will go. Omicron is less severe. Well, if that's so, but I think a few days ago there's only there's one person who has been fully vaccinated on the age of 80 actually died of Omicron. So a PCR test should be limited. The Commonwealth was split rat cost 50-50. New South Wales has 50 million rat tests on order, and blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. So that's what's going on at this point in time. And this morning we received this news. I think a lot of people, if you're in Australia, you might receive this as well. So New South Wales recorded 11,201, and I think this is only the beginning, as we are going through a New Year's Eve, more parties going on. I expect the next week, once everybody return back on the holiday, now this number probably not just double, probably will be quadruple or even higher. So watch out if you were in. I mean, if you're vaccinated, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that you're fully protected as well. So not getting contracted is the key. You don't want to get contracted. Although there are people arguing that the death rate is very low, fatality is very low, but when you get sick, when you get viruses, you might not die, but probably some part of your organ or your health can be affected for long term. Now you don't want that to happen. Okay, obviously I don't want that to happen to myself, and I don't want that to happen to my kid as well. So just watch out for your personal safety and health and safety over the holiday season. So Victoria has gone on record as well, 3,767. I think it's going to be more than that compared to the number have been tested compared with New South Wales. So I think this is going to be a lot more. And if you may have followed the news yesterday, there has been a testing center in New South Wales had wrongly given out a result of 1,000 tests, and half of them is actually positive rather than negative. Now that is crazy. I mean, if you already receive a negative PCR report, then you probably just go elsewhere and meet your friend and go in a party, especially we are in the holiday seasons. And then you receiving a notification a couple hours back and saying, no, sorry, we're wrong, you're actually positive. You are already probably in a party room with numbers of people. So that's just not a real good news. Now let's look at Queensland. So Queensland, Brisbane record 1,000 now. That again is a record. That is a record, and now they do not require a PCR test. Interstate travelers. That will mean more people are crossing the border. Potentially will have more effect on the increase of the COVID number in Queensland as well. And not just saying that, but South Australia is more concerning, because South Australia is a much smaller state and also city, and recorded almost the same as Queensland. So that is a very concerning issue there, especially if you've been to Adelaide. It's a much smaller city compared to Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. It's very small, and if you got 1,400, well, almost 1,500 people contracted, that's the ratio is actually very high, and that's not the end. As I said, this is just the beginning, because we are only just in the middle of the holiday season. We still got a few days to go, and over the weekend for the New Year's, don't know what will happen, because as many already on holiday move, and let's have a look now. So the question here is, would the government of Australia close its border again? Now, my answer is not likely. Very, very unlikely. Why I say that? Because back in the day, now this is going to the politicians' promises, because they promises for the 4 phases. Remember, if you follow my channel long enough, once we hit the 90% fully vaccination ratio of the population, the government and the nation of Australia should start to open up its border and moving back to the normal life. Now, the problem here is how do we define normal life? Probably that has been redefined over the past few months, especially over the past few days. But again, by saying that, I don't think going back to lockdown is a way to go, because I'll explain at the second half of my video here. Now, this is a news came out on the 21st of December, which is just 5 days right after, 6 days right after the opening of the border. Obviously, there has been numbers of recorded COVID cases there, and the news came out say with 90% vaccinated, Australia holds firm on no lockdown strategy. So no more lockdown means no more border closure. So I don't think that they will actually go back to that. But by saying that, the Prime Minister did call for cabinet meeting tomorrow, for emergency meeting. I'm not too sure how that will go, but I think they will still stay firm with the decision and moving ahead for the whole full opening. So let's have a look now. If you have followed my channel long enough, I've always been saying this, because we've been practicing in the area of migration long enough to actually see the trend. Every time the economy collapses around the world, Australia as a government and the nation will utilize its migration policy to pull its economy back. So the same thing. So although we have seen these COVID cases rising, obviously it's going to hit the economy again. And the good news, everything has two sides. Now that's the bad side, obviously, hit the economy. But the good side is how does the government of Australia reflect back to actually get that economy back? Now, one way to do it is migration policy, and they are utilizing it. As you can see, they're opening up the border now to actually get international students. That's the temporary migrants. And they're also prioritizing on a lot of permanent resident as well. So I don't think lockdown and border control will still be there, or restriction will still be there. But the more of the opening up, and probably more of checking and testing should be done. And the migration in the future is actually a very bright as we looking into this trend. So let's have a look what happened, and which I had actually done some video on this one previously. So this is all the previous information. This is from Immigration Department, Home Affairs, Migration Program Planning level. At this point in time, we can see we are at 160,000, and they are looking to have more because there's more consultation. Although there are few news came out talking about restricting more migrants to actually get the salary higher for salary growth for the Australians. But I doubt that will go, because we need to look Australia as its regions and what's happening in the neighborhood in all the Asian countries. If you do recall, I mean, my age, I recall back 20-30 years ago, back in Asia, it's compared to Australia, it was really, it's not able to be compared at all. But if you go to those modern cities nowadays, for example, Beijing, Shanghai, Taipei, Hong Kong, Bangkok, Mumbai, and all these big cities, what about the major cities in Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore? And then you reflect back to the cities of Australia, you cannot see there's much of difference, and the competition of these Asianic countries could soon, not just in years, not just in decades, but years, can overtake the competitiveness of Australia. So as a nation of Australia to actually grow, and by not the climate change, also the aging populations, we need more young people there. Every country is like that. I'm talking about, for example, in Japan, Tokyo in Japan, right? It's a nation that hasn't really been adopting migration policies for probably the last 50 years. They think Japanese population is enough, right? But recently they had opened up migration policies for workers in the aged care systems. So as you can see, even a populated country like Japan, they are altering, amending their migration policies. Why wouldn't Australia do it? Because if Australia wanted to stay competitive enough and be on that top level in compared to all these Asianic countries, they have to open up migration policies. Otherwise, the planning will soon, in the very coming years, be overtaken by a lot of cities and countries in Asia. So I don't think by restricting, if you're leader of the nation of Australia, the more migrants in the future and the better migration policies is required, is needed, is 100% needed. I don't think, and they have proved this in the past election back in 2017 and 18, where the current government back then was arguing that we need to have less migrants. So that's why they have decreased the migration level, permanent migration level, from 190,000 down to 160,000. And over the last few years, it has proved, now even if it's decreased, there are still traffic jam, there are still congestions in Sydney and Melbourne. By means these 2 years, there's no international student arrivals, there are still congestions, there are still traffic jams in the major cities. Well, why that actually proved that the migrants wasn't the problem to this. The problem is the public infrastructure, not the migrants. Migrants actually help out a lot of other areas. For example, in the rural areas, in the farming areas, there's very required personnel to be actually work there. So let's look at this one. This is the migration program Australia 2022 and 23. I've actually clicked on the planning here, and which get us into this intergenerational report. It's a very long report with almost 200 pages. I'm not going to go through all of this, but if you search the keyword of migration, you probably can hit yourself into somewhere. It says there's low fertility, blah blah blah, aging population, impact on long-term economic growth. So there's looking into all how they can grow the economy and the impact of COVID, and you can actually see some numbers here moving. They're looking into increase of the migration planning level, so that's pretty obvious because they are looking to actually get to 38.8 million in population in 2060. So that's the goal. That's the goal. And the goal is, if it's gonna only rely on the birth rate, now they're not gonna meet that requirement. So you can work it out. The migration rate is required through this timing for the next couple decades. And what's this one? This is the parliamentary information in regards to budget review in 2021 and 22. Again, we are looking into an increase of the net overseas migrations as well. Now that number including the tourists and all that, but I think it's gonna be more. There's more amendments gonna come up in this one due to the recent COVID issue there. Now finally, I will draw you back into some news came out back in October. So see, this one you probably missed out. I've actually done this information back in October. Increase the skill migration to 200,000 per year. Now that's only skill migration. That's a key thing. The Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry is actually talking and putting that into media. So it's a major thing here. Now if it's going to be 200,000, that means it's going to be more than 200,000, including all those family refugee protection visa altogether. So the politician came out and said, look, we don't need that many migrants. I think that's more for political election purpose rather than actually getting into a resolution of the fact required by the nation. And also the New South Wales new premier back in October 12 also said this: Australia needs explosive surge of 2 million migrants. Now the reason is as I had said, the the government, some of the politicians, they're not lying. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Some of the politicians, they came out and said that we don't need migrants. I think that's I can't say that lying, but it's more for election purpose, if you know what I mean. But this is the fact. This is the real things happening. I mean, all around the world, every country has been hit by COVID. Now, if your population is not good enough, especially for an advanced nation like Australia, with a 25 million, that's not enough with that large continent. You gotta imagine, if you got a farm field so big, can you work it out by yourself? No, you need more people to work with you on the farm. Same thing, the country is so big and the nation is so big, they need more migrants. And also, plus the aging population, the competitiveness came out from Asia on the neighboring countries. Would actually Australia still rely on 25 million and the birth rate to be out competing all the Asiatic country? I mean, Australia doesn't need to be dominant, but you need to stay at that competitive level, right? So migration still is the key. Again, at the very end of this video, what I'm trying to summarize here is that we're looking through this Omicron variants hitting the door of Australia. Would this actually cause and result with another border closure? I doubt it. I don't think so. Australia relies heavily. First thing, the first three commodity is all the minerals like the coals, steel, and iron ores and all that kind of thing. But if we're looking downwards from that, apart from the financial sector, is the international education. What about the tourism? What about the tourists, right? And hospitality industry, they rely that heavily. Now, if the border continue to be closed, these two industries will probably face a huge issue and close down a lot of business there. So I don't think the government will actually permit a closure or lockdown. I think it's gonna be the chances very slim. And also coming back, the good side of the economy goes down is the migration planning level and the policy will have the advantage in the coming future. Anyhow, should you have more question and query, more than welcome to leave a comment right down below. And I see you next video. Goodbye.